Hi there, and welcome to episode 70 of the Ski Podcast, and thanks for joining us, listener. Firstly, as always, I'd like to thank Switzerland Tourism for sponsoring the podcast. I literally couldn't produce these shows without their support. And listener, if you're joining us for the first time, make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're a regular listener, just share the podcast and let your friends know about it. Now, in today's episode, we're going to be talking about the booming market for ski holidays for next winter. And there's a racing focus as well. We've got an interview with Martin Bell, Britain's most successful male downhill racer. We've got news of the Afghan Ski Challenge, and we're going to be finding out a lot about the Inferno, which is the downhill race in Murren, Switzerland, that us mere mortals can enter. We've got updates on travel and snow reports from around the world. But first, I'm going to introduce my guest today. We have Vanessa Fisher, who represents Lehman Weir in the UK. Hi, Vanessa.
Good morning.
And we're also joined by Nick Morgan, who's the managing director and founder of the Ski Chalet Holidays. Hi, Nick.
Good morning, Iain. How are you doing?
Very well. Traditionally, we like to start by finding out when you last skied or snowboarded last. So, Vanessa, would you like to answer that question?
So I had a short break in February 2020, so over a year ago, and I did 2 days in Arc 1950 and 2 days in La Clusaz, and that was it. Yeah, last year.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been a while. What about yourself, Nick?
Well, I was very lucky. Early March, I went to Switzerland for about 10 days, sort of touring and off-piste skiing. Had an absolute ball. Then ended up going to Courchevel for about 3 days, where I skied with some guests of ours who first came on holiday in 1983, and they've been on holiday with us every single year since then. Unbelievable. So that was fantastic. Then, of course, flew back to the UK into a slightly different world.
Yeah, exactly. I think actually I was in, because I seem to recall that you were in Arosa just like a week or so before me. So you were in Switzerland. I managed to ski then. Yeah, and then it all changed when I was going from Arosa to Andermatt. Okay, well, none of us have done too much this season. Let's look at the current situation for how things stand. There is a Global Travel Taskforce, which sounds very grand, but it's is being headed by Grant Shapps and Matt Hancock. So who knows what's going to happen there. They're due to report on April the 12th, which is just under a month now. And they're going to tell us, what may or may not happen from May the 17th. But since the last podcast, there's been quite a bit of news about vaccinations. Cyprus, Greece and Turkey have all said that they'll accept British tourists with vaccinations. So we really will depend on what happens on the way back. The EU have announced their digital green pass. And this is kind of akin to the common pass we discussed back in episode 61 in the autumn. But, prospects for travel, are looking much better specifically for us for ski for next winter. But it's easy to forget that skiing is still going on around the world. And we have 3 snow reports for this episode. They are from Andy Butterworth, who you remember from episode 66. He tells us about the situation in St Anton. We've got Ben from Maybe Ski, who's out in Whistler in Canada, our first report from there this winter. And Ed Mannix from Matterhorn Chalets in Zermatt has a report as well.
Since I last spoke with Iain on the podcast regarding what's happening in St Anton, things have sort of changed and changed again. The lift system closed, politics got in the way. The Austrian Bergbahn, the Arlberger Bergbahn decided to close the lift systems for safety reasons. Due to the mass testing that was being taken place. As a result of the mass testing, there were no serious cases. In fact, there was almost been no cases at all in St Anton in the last 8 weeks. The lift system opened again on reduced capacity, so there's only about 4 or 5 lifts open on the mountain, depending whether it's a weekday or a weekend. But that's more than enough to give everyone the chance to ski and enjoy the amazing conditions we currently have. January saw some epic snow, some of the deepest stuff many people here have ever skied in. February saw glorious weather, lots of sunshine, beautiful skies, clear blue skies, lovely sun, great peace. It was ideal skiing conditions. Certainly the season that we are forgetting is a season that we won't ever forget. That's for sure. Currently, in the middle of March, we have incredible snow. The last 4 days have been filled 24 hours a day of solid snowfall, lovely, soft, fluffy flakes covering the mountain. Everything's white again. There's well over 3 meters at the top of the mountains here, the top of the Gamp and Gautig, and certainly at the top of the Veluga mountain, of untouched powder snow, where the lift systems aren't open going up that high. But yeah, 3, probably 4, maybe even up to 5 meters right at the very, very top. The conditions are glorious. You can ski fresh lines top to bottom because there's nobody on the slopes. It's soft, lovely, fresh, fluffy snow, the kind of snow where you can ski for 3 or 4 hours of solid powder and your legs don't actually hurt because it's that easy riding through. The forecast ahead is some light snow showers over the next couple of days, and coming into sun towards the middle of next week. So it's going to be a pretty good end to the season, I think, in St Anton, in terms of skiing anyway, for those that have been lucky enough to be able to enjoy it. The lift systems are due to close we think on the 5th of April, maybe the 11th of April if they extend it by another week. And that's the situation here currently. It's been a season that we certainly won't forget, for many reasons, least of all the incredible snow that we've had.
Hi Iain, Ben Cook here from Maybe Ski, just bringing you a quick snow report from Whistler in British Columbia, Canada. Like Europe, we've had an amazing snow year this year actually, with over 10 meters of snow so far, and a lot more in the forecast too. We've got a base running at about 275 to 300 centimeters, so very deep snow base up here. We've had a great snowpack in the resort all year. We've been very lucky that the lifts have been running on both mountains, Whistler and Blackcomb, all year. It's really been very lucky for us locals up here. They've done a great job at Whistler Blackcomb with implementing sort of COVID policies this year, with a real emphasis on planning ahead. Now, the way they've done this is by implementing a reservation system. So even ski season pass holders, day ticket holders, everyone has to have an advanced reservation to ski, and they have a cap on the number of people who can ski in one day. They didn't release the number of that cap, but certainly it hasn't seemed too busy on mountain all year at all. The one downside to that is it has resulted in some longer lift lines at the base, because they're only allowing people from their own bubbles or groups to go up together. You can't share a lift or gondola with a stranger. So that's resulted in longer lift lines at the base, but actually once you get up top and people spread out, it's been quiet. I haven't waited in a lift line for longer than 5 minutes this year, which is almost unprecedented for Whistler in the busy season. Weather-wise, it's been great. It's been cold, snowy. We've had a slightly warmer and sunnier week last week, but we've got a big storm rolling in now, expecting another 60 to 70 centimeters of fresh snow in the next week and cold temperatures. We've definitely seen a bit of a boom in ski touring and backcountry skiing out here. We've got great access to the local backcountry up here. So there's been a huge increase in activity on that end, as well with snowmobile access skiing as well, which is paired quite dangerously with some fairly hairy avalanche conditions this year. We've had a bit of an odd snowpack with a very deep, persistent weak layer, which has been there all year. So we've certainly had to play a bit more carefully than usual. But apart from that, it's been a great season so far. We're expecting to have an excellent March, and the resort is staying open until April at least. We really have our fingers crossed for an extended opening into May as per usual years. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Thanks, Iain.
This is Ed Mannix from Matterhorn Chalets in Zermatt with an up-to-date snow report on the local ski area, which has continued to operate normally since the start of this winter. Earlier in the week, we had some impressive snowfalls down to well below village level, and this has helped to freshen up what was a completely respectable but slightly tired piste system. Ski conditions, both on and off prepared runs, are now as good as you can get, and today the weather was sunny with a clear blue sky, but very cold, with temperatures dropping to as low as minus 20 degrees at the Upper Clyde Matterhorn lift station. All the 3 interlinked Zermatt ski areas are completely operational, and the lift systems at Rothorn, Gornegret and Kleinmatthorn are fully functional. The recent snow, low temperatures and the lack of people during what would otherwise be a busy period, the pistes are in excellent condition, even later in the day and even down to the village from both Furry and Suniga. On the other hand, the ski link to the neighbouring resort of Cervinia remains sadly shut, as Italy endures a further wave of corona infections. Off-piste conditions are also good, although the high winds have done much to spoil the runs down from Schwarze and in the Garten area between Trockensteig and Ferg. More sheltered areas below Rothorn and between Hotelle and Gant are, however, still very skiable. The Zermatt forecast for the next week is generally good, with low temperatures and sunshine, but the weather is expected to change towards the end of the month with some light snowfalls.
Great. So, it's reassuring in some respects to know that there is still some skiing going on around the world. And yet again, very jealous of those who are out there. And, we've discussed about the prospects for travel, but, British skiers are clearly very confident already. We had Joe Ponte from Ingham's on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he told me that their sales were 100% up year on year. Now, Nick, this week, I've seen some quotes from you saying that sales are stratospheric. So I'm guessing you've seen a similar trend at Le Ski, is that right?
We certainly have, yeah. Normally this time of year, of course, in March, we would be in the middle of operations. We'd be having our 80 staff, 33 chalets, all that sort of thing going on. And also we'd be selling holidays for next winter. And normally by now we'd be about 15% capacity. And now we're almost 60% full for next winter, which is just incredible, but true. So 4 times busier than last year, which is it's just remarkable. We keep sort of checking that the computer's providing the right stats, but it is. And the thing about chalet holidays is, once all our 33 chalets are full, they're full. We have 2 planes. We're not going to get any more planes. So it really is. It's looking like the earliest sellout winter ever.
Well, I mean, that is tremendous news because, we've had a really tough year for the ski industry in general, and then positive news like that is great. Obviously, some of those people must be people who've carried over holidays from maybe last season and this season, but a lot of those people are also new bookings as well, right?
Yeah, of course, there are some deferrals, and, wonderful. Thank you very much to all those people who did defer. We've got some amazingly loyal guests who knew that was the best way to help us out. But also there's lots of new clients coming from, areas. Maybe they used to go and ski with another company who maybe don't exist anymore, or they're not doing chalet holidays anymore. And, the chalet concept is still a really, really attractive one for people who want to go on holiday with a fully bonded operator who offer the whole package with flights and transfers.
Yeah, it's a sad but true point you make there about other companies, going out of business. What about obviously bookings are up significantly. I wondered if you had any anecdotal or any evidence that people are booking more than one holiday for next winter, because this is something that I've heard a couple of times mentioned.
Oh, absolutely. I was on the phone to a bloke the other week, and he had originally booked to go in March 2020. He then deferred to January of this year, 2021. And I just happened to be on the phone when he rang, and he said, look, I'm going to defer again to next winter. But we want to book another holiday for later on in the winter. And I just said to him, it's just amazing how, I said, can you just explain, what makes you want to do this? How you feel such loyalty? And he said, well, the thing is, I've been coming on holiday with your company for about 7 years now, and when we came about 5 years ago, I brought my son and his girlfriend, and they got engaged at the top of the Signal chairlift in Courchevel, and I'm now looking after the children from that marriage, and I just don't feel I can go anywhere else. And that's the sort of loyalty that we seem to have, and it's remarkable.
Well, I love that story. That's a really brilliant story. I mean, that loyalty, and you talk about all your clients having carried over holidays, etc. I mean, this winter has there's evidently been a disaster for most people working within the industry and resorts, etc. How have you physically got the Ski Chalet Holidays through the winter without having been able to sell any holidays?
Well, I run Le Ski with my sister Liz, and I think resilient is the word that you would use about her. And basically, she put together a plan, and that plan was to communicate with people. It was to actually phone people up and say, "Look, I'm really sorry, but you can't go on holiday." And I think that approach is much more credible and genuine with guests, and therefore they feel like they want to help you out, and so they did. And credit to Liz for organising that, and credit to all the staff for getting on the phone and calling people, because it's not an easy call. To say, remember that dream that you booked a while ago, you can't have it. So I think an open approach, an honest approach, and an organised sister is what's brought us through.
Right. Okay. Well, well done. I take it you the staff that you've had, have they been furloughed, or have you taken advantage of any of the business loans available or anything like that?
The UK staff. Well, we're sort of on flexible furlough, because the thing is now we're actually really busy taking bookings for next winter. So you can't just. And also, in fact, when the first cancellation of the season happened about a year ago, we didn't put anybody on furlough. And again, I think that was. I mean, it didn't seem really sensible to be paying everybody, normal wages for essentially phoning people up to cancel their holiday and offer refunds or deferrals. But I think that level of service has sort of brought us through. And you hear stories of some rather large companies who just put the answer phone on, and I'm not convinced that's the right way through. Have we taken advantage of any loans? Yes. I don't think the government have really fully understood the impact on travel. I think
that's a massive understatement for sure. This is obviously probably the most significant challenge that you've had. I mean, you've referred a couple of times there to how long you've been in business. Can you tell us how and when the company started?
Oh, blimey. Right, so that was back in 1982. I'd flunked my business studies degree, and I decided to leave the country and get a job in the south of France. So I was 21, and I started chatting to the bloke in the next tent, and he said to me, "What do you do in the winter?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I'm 21. What? I could do anything. What do you do?" And he said, "I go skiing." And I promise you, my response was, "What's that?" I'd never skied. I'd never really heard of skiing. I didn't have any friends who skied. And, my parents weren't particularly sporty. And that wasn't the sort of holiday we went on. We went in a caravan to the Bois de Boulogne, and bought baguettes and learned to speak French when I was 5. So he described skiing, and I said, "Well, that sounds good." So he was actually working in Kitzbühel at the time. So I took a train up to Kitzbühel, found an apartment to rent. And but I said to the lady whose apartment it was, "I'm afraid I don't have any money." We didn't have any sort of family funds or anything. And she said, "Well, you can pay me at the end of the season. It's fine." I mean, that just does not happen nowadays. And so that was just incredible luck. So I spent the first season in Kitzbühel, learning to ski, having a great time, and obviously just finding out what an amazing sport it is. And then the following summer, I was again working as a courier on a campsite in the south of France, and the bloke in a tent 2 doors down or something said, "Why do you go to Kitzbühel? It's only 800 meters high. Why don't you go to the Three Valleys? It's amazing." And I looked at a map and I went, "Oh, that's a good idea." And I hired a car and I went and I drove up to Murren, because that's where I was told would be the right place to start, because it's in the middle of the Three Valleys. And I couldn't find anywhere to rent. And this lady said, "Why don't you go around to Courchevel?" And I went, "Oh, okay, fine." And I drove around to Courchevel, started knocking on a few doors, and I met somebody who had an apartment, and that's why we ended up in Courchevel 1650, and everybody that second winter who'd been on holiday with us in Kitzbühel came to Courchevel, and then the following year everybody who'd been the year before came again and brought more friends, and it just well, to use a pun, but it snowballed, and I think also because that was the way that I was earning my living. You know, you take it quite seriously. I didn't have a grant. I didn't have any access to any other funds. It was just, if you didn't make the money, you didn't live properly. So we took it quite seriously. And then after about 5 years, my organised sister got involved. And so I could sort of stay in resort and do chatting and ski guiding when it was allowed. And Liz and my mum organised things back in the UK. And yeah, gosh, that's a memory from a long time ago.
I get it is a long period of time that you've been in business there, and I think I've known you through the industry for a long time as well. I know you're a Bob Dylan fan. I think you're a fan of that line. I don't know which song it's from. I have to be honest, but it's "If you ain't got nothing, you've got nothing to lose," right?
Absolutely, and it's from Like a Rolling Stone, and I really do think when I was 21 and sort of making that. Well, it didn't take me more than a few seconds to make a decision to hop on a train to Kitzbühel. And I think if I'd started later and I had something to lose, I wouldn't have taken a risk. But I certainly didn't feel like I was taking a risk. And then gradually you realise that, this thing that I really enjoy doing could actually become a career. And of course, well, it ended up, being my life really.
Great. Well, I mean, that's an excellent story. I love hearing stories of how people set up and started off in the ski industry, and it's looking very good for next winter. I do have to ask you, while we've got the opportunity now, we've referred to what's traditionally known as the elephant in the room, Brexit, a number of times, kind of been forgotten a bit, but that is going to kind of complicate things perhaps a little bit for next season. What are your thoughts, and how are you planning to staff the chalets for next winter?
It's very complicated. I don't mean to be condescending. It just is very complicated. It's and I think it's one of the reasons that some of the larger operators have sort of disappeared from the chalet picture, because when we first started, the chalet world was run by small specialist companies, and I think it's going to return to being run by small specialist companies. Prices have had to rise to help us to pay for the extra costs because of the B word. So to be honest, it's still a little unclear how everything actually fits in. But there's a good framework.
Okay, well, that's promising to hear, and certainly I know that we're all looking forward to next season, and that's really good news that bookings are looking so strong. Let's come back to this season. Regular listeners will have heard our roving reporter Charlie Rees. He was out in Murren and reported from there in episode 69. But when he was there, he also found out about the Inferno, the famous downhill race that the resort hosts every winter. And I'm just going to play a bit of audio from his interview there.
From there. But now it'd be great to move on to talking about the Inferno race. Kurt, you were instrumental in getting the race into the current format that it's currently in. How did you get involved with the Inferno, and what makes it such a special race from your point of view?
Well, in 1971 I had to give up ski racing because of some bad injuries, and I was elected a director of Murren Tourism and at the same time a technical chief of the ski club. So I had to organize the Inferno race coming in 1972 for the first time. And I felt that that race could be an important international event again if we would release the race from the competition rules of the Swiss Ski Federation and opened it to everybody without asking for an international license. Before this, you could not go to a foreign country without a license and without going to the National Ski Federation where the race was held. So on top of that, the course from the Schilthorn over 15 kilometers down to the valley of Lauterbrunnen with that breathtaking panorama of the Bernese Alps so close is surely one of the most impressive courses in the world. And with that we managed in a short time to build up the numbers of racers from around 40 to over 1,000. I believe that Inferno is the real mother of downhill racing.
Perfect. It's a very interesting race and a lovely course which I've got to experience certain sections of today. So why is it actually called the Inferno Race, and how's the race changed since the beginning in 1928?
Well, when the members of the Kandahar Ski Club with Sir Arnold Lann organized the first races in 1928, 29 and 30, it was a fight of a whole hour over unprepared slopes and even through forests down to the finish in Lauterbrunnen. They felt that it was an infernal ride. That's where the name Inferno comes from. Today the course is perfectly prepared and gives hundreds of amateur races the feeling of skiing in a World Cup race with the record time standing around 10 minutes.
Perfect, that's a very impressive time. Perfect. And just over to you, Alan. So do you have any other tips that would-be racers might find helpful when they come to race in the Inferno?
Well, having had the experience of crashing and burning on my first 5 attempts at the Inferno, the number one tip I have is to try and ski within your limits. It's really hard when you go out at the start line, and the speed that you can get up to going down the Schilthorn is quite addictive. But if you can ski within your limits, you're going to have an alright time. If you ski without your limits and crash and burn, you're going to have a pretty poor time. And almost every racer I've met on the finish line will always say, I could have done there or there, I could have been faster. But the ones that can ski within their limits and get down without the crashing, they're the ones that are going to be not overjoyed with their time, but they'll certainly be happy. But you're always going to, and you'll always find someone to race against as well.
Perfect, that sounds very interesting. So how about the most challenging part of the course for you? Whereabouts were you having your crashes, and how would you avoid them next time?
The start's obviously a challenge because you've got to go out, you're going to go fast, but you've got to be in control. The traverses, so there's a traverse from the Schilthorn traverse, there's an Engenthal traverse, and they are long, and it's trying to stay in the tuck, stay as low as you can, to go as fast as you can, but without killing yourself for the rest of the race. But the Hohenluke, so down towards the Almendhübel, there's a big corner there. If you can get that corner right, get up through the wood, and you're fast enough and fit enough to get up there fast, that's where the race is going to be won and lost, and that separates the men from the boys and the women from the girls.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. And how about you, Kurt, with your 4 wins? Do you have any tips for would-be racers?
Yeah, as Alan said already, should you race for the first time, get physically fit and maybe find somebody who can show you the course or the special spots of the course. And especially do not forget to use your brain racing. You will not win the race in the steepest or fastest places, but you can lose them there.
Perfect. And for you, Alan, have there been any real classic races? I heard you said you've been a part of 30 races, something like that. Is any one of them really standing out to you as your favourite race?
They all stand out in certain ways because the Inferno is never the same 2 years in a row, and sometimes the start line isn't on the Shilton, it's lower down because of avalanches or lack of snow. Sometimes the finish line is higher than Lauterbrunnen. It's maybe at Winteregg. It can be even in Murren we've had finishes, but definitely the most memorable race for me was the last one, 2020. And then I was fortunate enough to have early starting time. My youngest daughter was forerunning the course, and my eldest daughter Lillian, she had a number at the end because she'd forerun the year before, and it was her first time, so you go to the back of the queue. And unfortunately my wife Vernick was on the finish line working, collecting the transceivers that do the time, so she had to worry all day about both her daughters managing to get down the course safe and well, but they both got down safe and well. It was quite an emotional time, I must say, to pass the finish line and have both daughters racing, so that's definitely the most memorable and satisfying race I've been involved in.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. That sounds a pretty special occasion for you. Perfect. It sounds like a very special race, and sadly this year it was cancelled due to the COVID pandemic. But how can people get involved next year? As I'm sure many people will be wanting to get back on the hill in Murren and give the Inferno a go.
Yes, the procedure to enter for the race is still the same. Get in touch with 3w.inferno-murren with UE. And you find all the necessary informations. Do that before middle of summer. And you have a chance to get in. Not everybody can get a place, depends how many of the old racers stop racing. We cannot have more than 1,800 racers coming down that day.
Okay, that wraps it up for today, but thank you very much for your time. It's very much appreciated. It was great to learn more about the Inferno, and I'm sure many people are going to be wanting to join next year. Yeah. Thanks very much.
Well, that was interesting what Charlie had to say there. Interestingly, on the panel today, we have experience of 27 Infernos between us. Sadly, only one of them is from me. So it's no accident I asked Vanessa and Nick to join me today. Vanessa, what would you say is so special about the Inferno? I think you've done it 11 times, is that right?
Yeah, so I did 3 or 4 years initially, and then had a break, and actually in that break was the reason why I didn't go back for a few years. Had a few kids, got 3 children, and then I think it was around 2012 I went back and then got sort of hooked into it again. And I think it's the combination of the adrenaline of taking part in a big event, and it's a downhill ski, as you know, with uphill sections, plus the chance to catch up with, lots of friends. Obviously, Nick and I both work in the ski industry, and it does tend to attract lots of people that work in the industry. So it's a combination of that sort of adrenaline, I think, and you'll know that, Iain, from doing all your sporting events. And then the chance to have a good fun weekend with mates that involves a bit of skiing at the same time.
I think you're understating it there, because we've had you on the show before where, you are pretty competitive. I think I'll put a link into the show notes, but it's not the only kind of amateur downhill racer around, is it? And I think maybe 3 seasons ago you competed in the kind of Grand Slam of these races. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, that was incredible. So I didn't even know it existed, but there's 3 races that form a series called the Super 3, Super Dry. And one is in Balaup, one is in Saas-Fee, and then the Inferno is in Murren. So 3 Swiss races. And if you take part in all 3, you actually end up with a preferential start number in the Inferno. And lots of people repeat the Inferno to try and get higher up the start position. So there's sort of that takes a role in why people come back and do it again as well, because they want to get higher up the ranking.
Because just to clarify, with the number of people who take part, if you end up getting quite a low start number, it is significantly more difficult, isn't it? Because the course typically does get quite rutted.
So there's lots of factors in even your initial first year entry. So if you are a member of one of the more prestigious ski clubs, whether that's a British one or a Swiss one, that affects your ranking. But generally, first timers will be in the last few hundred races. And obviously the course then is much more rutted. So the aim for a lot of these amateurs that go is to work their way slowly up the ranking. And yeah, I hadn't appreciated that by taking part in the Super 3, you really jump up. So I think my last one, which was when it was part of the Super 3, I started around number 700 out of 1,800.
Right. Okay. And what's the highest start number you've had?
That was it.
Oh,
yeah.
Right. Okay. So even the best you've had is starting around 700. Now, I have to fess up here. In the only occasion that I took part in the Inferno, I was a journalist, taking part as a journalist. And I got to go, I think I was in the top 50 for sure. I can't exactly remember. What I do remember is we went up to the restaurant at Piz Gloria that Charlie described in episode 69, where they have the fantastic Bond Museum up there. And we got to have some croissant and a cup of tea using the Bond inscribed crockery that they have up there, and then went down to the start fairly early. And it was very cold at that particular time, but I got an early start and therefore kind of what you might call a relatively clear run down. Nick, can I bring you in at this point? You have even more experience with 15 Infernos under your belt, I think. What is it that makes the Inferno stand out to you?
Initially, I have to be honest, I was invited by a friend. I didn't really know what I was going to get involved in. I didn't, at that time, people didn't ski with helmets, really. Most people didn't. I didn't realize you needed a helmet for actually doing the race. And I turned up without a helmet, with the completely wrong skis. And I met a German guy in the street who had obviously had a really good start time. And he was walking back to his apartment with a beer in his hand about sort of 9:10 or something. And I said, "Oh, can I borrow your helmet, please?" And he went, "Yeah, sure, no problem." And he sort of gave me his helmet. And so I was unprepared, I think you would call it. But the thing that attracted me was actually going to a different ski resort. It sounds really spoiled, but I'd been skiing a lot, in the French resorts, and just the idea of going to Murren. And I think it's just the most incredible setting on that shelf opposite Wengen. To wake up and look out. Oh, it's just stunning. And to look out at the Eiger, the Jungfrau and the Monk in the morning, and see all these people from all over the world. I think that was what was really exciting for me, actually. Loads of Swiss, but also people come from all over the world. And there was one year an American guy won it, and I think he'd arrived in Bern Airport the night before, and he sort of said, "Where's the course?" He didn't really know what he was doing, but he just won it. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I never took part seriously though, Iain. I have to say. I was more of a luncher.
And that social side of things is important, but equally, everybody is talking about the race and what start number they've got, etc. And you referred to the skis there, Vanessa. Obviously, you mentioned this course is I guess unique in that it goes up and down at the same time. So there's a balance you've got to strike in terms of the right skis to take.
And people that go there regularly, again, they take it really seriously. So when I was taking part as part of the Super 3, we had an Australian guy on our team. He'd come from Australia to Switzerland and to spend, what would that be, 3 months, I think he did, going between various different resorts, taking in, that Murren, Belle Alpe and Saas-Fee, and he was obsessed with wax. What wax was he going to put on the bottom of his skis? Seriously. And actually, again, through going to the various places where you can wax your skis and resorts, you get to meet all these characters and, the chat about what length your skis are. I actually ended up buying a pair because my feet are quite small. I could never find a pair of skis that adjusted down to my boot size. And it would get me really stressed out because I was usually renting them from a ski shop just for that 2 or 3 days. And for the last, taking part in the Super 3, I thought I can't have that hassle and stress each time I get to a resort as to will there be a pair of skis at work. So I bought I think they were 187 centimetre long ski, which for me is really long. But some of these guys, you go in the lift and yeah, they're on 2m10, 2m20.
Which too, those type of skis are great for the downhill sections and the gliding sections, but the nature of this race is that there are some sections where you have to go uphill. And actually, we had Ed from Matterhorn Chalets doing his snow report earlier, and he takes part most years, I think, and doesn't go for that huge downhill ski. He goes for something that's a bit lighter and a bit more malleable. He takes part though in what I think might be called the Triple Crown, because as well as the actual Inferno, there's a giant slalom and a cross-country race around the resort as well, isn't there?
Incredible to watch, because they make circuits around the village. So again, as a spectator, you get to see these guys, making these laps, and some of them are absolutely, like Ed, they're absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, well, Ed did suggest to me that it's good to do some practice, because on the occasion that I went along, I did do the 3 different races. And I actually got into Murren I can't remember the exact days, but I got into Murren in the afternoon, checked into my hotel, went to the hire shop, picked up a pair of cross-country skis, and within an hour, I was kind of racing around this course, having not done cross-country for 20 years.
Quite common actually as well. There are a lot of people.
And there's this bit I hadn't looked at the course, didn't know what was going on. I knew there was a bit of you go round in a circle up and down, but there's some kind of bumps in it as well. I wouldn't kind of describe it as a jump, but rollers in it, and that's quite a challenge when you haven't been on there for a while. And that's where all the crowds were, people waiting to watch the incompetent people on their cross country skis having a go on that. But if you are kind of competitive and there's lots to do, and if you're not competitive and you just want to take part, it's tremendous fun. So the Inferno didn't take place this year, but it will take place next year, and they are typically oversubscribed, so I'm going to put a link into the show notes, and listener, if that's piqued your interest, you can go along and take part or watch. Now, from the amateurs to the professionals, back when Nick was setting up the ski, Martin Bell was just starting out on what turned out to be a very successful career racing real downhill for Team GB. And listener, you may have already listened to my interview in the special episode, which we published last week. But in this particular clip, Martin talks about sibling rivalry, because his brother is Graham Bell, and appearing on the Wogan Show and the Eddie the Eagle effect at Calgary '88. Do you think that sibling rivalry between you and Graham drove you both forward?
It did at certain times. When we were much younger, he was, quite a bit behind me and always chasing me. So it was driving him. I was chasing, the older boys, the Hill End crew, people like Midge White and Davy Mercer and Scott Dobson. So I was chasing the ones ahead of me, and my little brother was chasing me. And then once we got onto World Cup, Graham had some injuries, quite bad injuries early on. So it took him a while to establish himself. And so really in the later part of our careers, I think we became very competitive, and, one race, one of us would be ahead, and then the next race, the other one would be ahead. And, we didn't like being beaten by our brother, but we didn't like being beaten by anyone. And it was probably better to be beaten by your brother than some Austrian that you didn't know. So, we worked together. We definitely worked as a team within a team, and, we pooled our skis, for example. We had a big group of skis that we tested together, and whoever was currently ahead in the rankings list that week got the first choice of the skis. So it was all done very fairly.
Right. Okay, that's good, because I think the kind of resources you had were probably not quite as good as what the British team are currently able to benefit from. So I guess those skis probably would be crucial in terms of your chances in any particular race.
Well, it's funny you say that. I actually think we were better supported in the 80s than the current British team is now. After we sent our daughter over to those Europa Cups I was talking about, we got sent a bill for the hotel and the coaching, and
Right.
that was not the case. That was not the case in the 80s. We were supported to go to every race, hotel bills covered, coaches' fees covered. So, I think, I mean, back in the 50s and the 60s, it was definitely a rich man's game, and our ski racers were called names like, Piers, and now, we've got a bloke called Dave. So that has changed. But I do think we've taken a bit of a backward step. There is not as good support financially for the racers now as we had in the 80s and 90s, I'm sad to say.
Right. Okay. Well, that's really interesting and possibly a bit disappointing to hear that. I mean, I do recall at the time when I was following it, Drambuie were a big sponsor of the team, and they were very visible in the ski world. And it was always great to go to the ski show and be able to get just a little nip of Drambuie. You went to 4 Winter Olympics, I think. That was Sarajevo 84, Calgary 88, Albertville 92, and Lillehammer 94. I'm guessing Calgary was probably your favorite. Would that be the case?
I probably have the most vivid memories of Sarajevo because it was my first, and it's just so impressive to be in an Olympic village. And for a lot of the time when we were racing at Calgary, we were not in the village because it was too far away. So we were up at a place called Fortress Mountain, which no one has ever heard of, and actually it's closed down. But its biggest claim to fame was it was used in the movie Inception. If you see the winter sequences, that's Fortress Mountain. So we were up in this beautiful place, and it was only 20 minutes drive from where the skiing events were. But no, Sarajevo was definitely something special. The whole country seemed behind the Olympics. We had no inkling of what was going to happen to Yugoslavia just a few years later. It was really, a huge turnaround.
You mentioned at Calgary, you didn't stay in the athletes' village, and I think it was traditional for the British team to stay in the athletes' village at that time. Was it difficult to get the team managers to allow you to go for that Fortress Mountain base?
Actually, I don't remember it being a huge issue. We were lucky in that the downhill was early on in the schedule, which it always is. So after the downhill, we were able to move down to the village and take part in the more social activities. But no, up in Fortress Mountain, the difficult part was actually getting accommodation. And we were kind of in a changing area that was next to the toilets that they'd put a few bunk beds in just to accommodate us. And the only other team up there was the Austrian team. So we knew we were doing the right thing.
Right. Yeah, that's a good clue, isn't it? I think the profile, was very high then. I would call it the height of skiing, certainly probably in terms of the numbers of people going. I mean, I was working for Bladen Lines around that time. They were a massive company, so many people going on chalet holidays, and Ski Sunday definitely had a lot more viewers in those days. I think prior to the games, I read that you even appeared on the Wogan show with David Vine. That must have been quite, I don't know, nerve-wracking perhaps? I don't know.
It was just all a blur really, but it's actually out there on YouTube if you care to look for it. And it went pretty well. Me and Graham on the sofa, and the other star on the show was Greta Scacchi, the actress who, we just were we were almost too scared to talk to her. We were just so much in awe of her. She just appeared in a movie called White Mischief, which was, had a few raunchy scenes in it. So yeah, it was a wonderful time. Ski Sunday was huge. Ski racing was the only game in town really, although freestyle was beginning to make its mark. It was a demonstration event in Calgary with moguls and aerials, and it was a great time.
And you say that, downhill was the only game in town, but it must have been strange being in the British team with all the attention that ended up falling on Eddie the Eagle Edwards with his attempts at ski jump.
Yeah, well, that came out of the blue. I mean, we had seen Eddie. We'd watched Eddie taking part in the New Year's ski jump at Garmisch for the couple of years before that. I think the year before Calgary, he had a really bad crash and broke his collarbone, and we didn't really expect him to be selected for the Olympics, but there was a loophole, because there had never been a British ski jumper. There were no qualification standards set for British ski jumping, so they just took anyone. Whereas, everyone else had to kind of qualify. And then the next time around in '92, they made Eddie qualify. And of course, he didn't make the qualification. So it was a one-off, it was a special situation. And we were just amazed by what was going on. Eddie dancing on the theater of a strip bar in Calgary and all sorts of stuff. He went home and released a single, and it went nearly to the top of the charts, didn't it? So just the media feeding frenzy, if it suddenly latches onto someone, it changes their life.
And just on the Team GB front, following on from Martin, worth noting that I saw Zoe Atkin picked up bronze in the freestyle halfpipe at the World Championships, and her sister is Izzy Atkin, who won a medal at the last Olympics. Mia Brooks, who we've mentioned before, also won in the Europa Cup, snowboard slopestyle. So they're both two promising results there looking forward. Now let's jump way across the world now to the Himalayas. And recently, I was lucky enough to interview James Wilcox from the tour operator Untamed Borders, and he takes people skiing to Afghanistan. And I talked to him about all sorts of things. I'm going to release a special episode about that, but I talked to him about the Afghan Ski Challenge. I noticed that one of the trips that you organise is specifically to join in on an event called the Afghan Ski Challenge. I wondered if you could tell me about that, James.
Well, the Afghan Ski Challenge, I'm going to take a little bit of a step back before the Afghan Ski Challenge, because the Afghan Ski Challenge is part of how the sort of development of ski tourism and skiing in Afghanistan even sort of began. So back in 2009, I met an expat who was working in Kabul, rather like your friend. And he, basically not every weekend, but most weekends in the winter, he, some British and some French expats who skied, would travel up to a place called the Salang Pass, which is a couple of hours drive north of Kabul. And they'd drive up to the top of the pass and then kind of ski tour a little bit further up and then ski down. And this used to be, a great sort of weekend activity, get away from Kabul, especially in the winter. And I met him, and he said if I was serious about being an Afghan tour operator, I should offer a ski trip. So he said he would take a week off work if I brought some tourists over, and he'd guide them. He used to be a ski guide in Europe. So I said, look, this sounds like a great idea. So in 2011, we had, again, 3 ski tourists came over, and he guided them. Now, at the same time, there was an organization, in Bamiyan. The New Zealand Army had been based in Bamiyan. Each province had a different country, basically looked after different provinces. The UK was based in Helmand province, which is often why Helmand province is quite well known in the UK as a place in Afghanistan. That was where there was a lot of difficult fighting. Now, the New Zealanders, they were part of the coalition, but they didn't really want to be part of the coalition. So they got given Bamiyan, which is why I've explained that Bamiyan is quite a peaceful place, and that's why we can go and do the skiing. Now, when they left different types of money for different development programs, and one of which was a tourism development program. And it was implemented by an organization called the Aga Khan Foundation. And the spokesman for the Aga Khan Foundation was a friend of my friend they went skiing north of Kabul. So any tourism development organization, he was like, well, what happens in the winter? Nothing happens in Bamiyan in the winter. It's in the mountains. So in the summer, people go up there. There's these beautiful lakes at a place called Bandi Amir. There's a lot of old Buddhist historical archaeological sites. It's fantastic. In the winter, nothing happens. So he persuaded them to implement a winter tourism section to that project. So that happened at exactly the same time as we were bringing our first tourists over. And it also at the same time in 2010, a Swiss journalist called Christoph Zürcher was stuck in Bamiyan in the winter. He couldn't fly out. And he's Swiss, so he's stuck in the mountains. There's lots of snow. So, of course, what does he do? He looks for a pair of skis. but there were no skis to be found in Bamiyan. He couldn't find anything anywhere. So he promised himself that if he came back, he would bring everyone. He'd bring like 10 sets of skis. He'd he'd train some people to ski, and he'd organise a ski race. So in 2011, in the same year that we did our first ski trip, and when this project was beginning, Christoph organised the first Afghan Ski Challenge. Well, this was all kind of going on separately. There wasn't a lot of interaction. But after 2011, we all kind of met and said, okay, we need to kind of try and collaborate on this. So we offer packages to the Afghan Ski Challenge, which, you know, is there to help train people to ski. The Aga Khan Foundation no longer are involved because that project is finished, but there's a big sort of idea of collaboration between different organizations. And so the ski race has happened every year. This is its also its 11th year. And it's not organized really by Christoph anymore. It's, you know, it's taken on by Ali Shah and Sajjad, who are the two best skiers in Afghanistan. If anyone wants to look further, there's a film called Where the Light Shines. I don't know if you're able to.
Yeah, I can drop it into the show notes. Yeah.
That would be amazing. Where the Light Shines is a film which documents Ali Shah and Sajjad in their, because when I first met them, they had both been skiing for less than a month, I think. And it's their story of trying to become the first Afghan Winter Olympians at Pyeongchang in 2018. I can't remember where it was, in Korea in 2018. I won't tell you whether they made it or not, but it's definitely well worth a look. And they organise the Afghan Ski Challenge every year now in Bamiyan. So that's the story of the challenge, and also the story of how kind of skiing.
Right. And what is the challenge? What it's a ski touring. Race, is that right?
It's a ski touring race. So it's not a timed. I mean, it is a timed event, but it's a mass start.
Yeah.
So it's basically the course is not the same each year. So I can't say exactly what the course is each time. There was one year where it was a mass downhill start, and then a transition to go up, and then a sort of, you know, then a downhill slalom back. But I mean, thankfully, no one was seriously injured in the mass downhill start. But it was decided not to repeat that because it was it really was quite dangerous. But it's basically, it's not a huge ski touring event. I mean, the distance of the ascent, I mean, the altitude gain of ascent has varied throughout the years from about 400, 500 meters to maybe 800, 900 meters. So it's a reasonable effort. And it's all about the uphill,
and it's the altitude as well. So,
and it's altitude, and it's never been won by a non-Afghan. Even in the early years when most of the Afghan guys, you know, they were novice skiers, they were finished even if they had, you know, even if they fell like 20 times coming down before the first international. We've got a couple of international people have come second, but no one from outside Afghanistan has ever won the Afghan Ski Challenge.
Right. Okay. But typically, I think I had a look on the website, and it said that you might have about 50 people taking part. Maybe half of them are from overseas, half of them domestic.
Yeah, it varies. I would say those numbers have shifted more. There's a lot more Afghan people taking part.
Great.
Part of that reason is more people know how to ski. So as part of Christoph's part of the kind of the ski project, it was supported by different people. For 3 years, it was sponsored by Volkel, the Swiss ski manufacturer. They helped support Ali Shah and Sajjad to try and go to the Winter Olympics. And each year there would be a ski school, two ski schools, one for boys and one for girls. And the boys would I talked about those valleys, these kind of 10 valleys heading south out of Bamiyan. There would be one person from each of those villages who would get trained in the ski school, and then they would take part in the Afghan ski challenge.
Brilliant.
And when this was happening, and when skiers, you know, started skiing in these villages, all the kids wanted to ski as well, but there wasn't that much equipment. So someone from the, you know, one of the dads in the villages would make skis would make wooden skis. So they would have kind of like tin cans for, you know, bashed out for edges, and just made of wood, and these kind of different types of bindings. I mean, there's some great photos somewhere on the internet of these early kind of skis. But sometime in 2016, 2017, the Slovenian army, which was based in the province next door, they were moving out. A lot of the international troops moved out of Afghanistan around that time, and they were bringing containers over to move their equipment out. And I can't even remember exactly how it happened, but there was a sort of donations of old ski and winter equipment were put in one of these containers to go out to Afghanistan and was distributed to Ali Shan Sajjad and the guys in Bamiyan. And then they distributed this to all of the villages where for 5 or 6 years people had trained and the kids had learned to ski on these wooden skis. So all of this sort of vintage Slovenian ski equipment is now up in the mountains and people ski all the time on it. And so there's a lot more competitors because a lot more people have equipment. And if they can get to the race, people will compete in the race. So now it's more like 100, 110 skiers, and the vast majority are Afghan guys from the mountains.
Well, that was really interesting. It's certainly, I've been thinking about skiing in Pakistan. Maybe Afghanistan will be the one, another one to add to that growing bucket list. Now, if you enjoy the Ski Podcast, don't forget you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/the Ski Podcast. And I'd just like to thank all of these guys who've bought me a cuppa since the last episode. That's Stuart Barber, who says he loves the podcast. Peter Taylor, really enjoying the podcast, only recently discovered it. Andrew Brannan, thanks for the podcast. You brighten up my commute. Also David Wade, Matt, Graham. And actually, Andrew also says he must be the UK's most prolific ski broadcaster. Well, I've been putting out an episode every week this season, and I've really enjoyed doing all of that. It's taken up a huge amount of my time. And recently, I've actually been working out how much time it takes out. And I'm just going to scale that down once we come to the end of the season, but there'll still be one per fortnight at a very minimum. So I'm going to keep putting out the episodes, but it's not all take. Don't forget, listener, that if you'd like a Ski Podcast sticker, we have a stock of stickers here. So please contact us through Facebook or drop us an email. Also, we've got some goodies from Switzerland Tourism to give away. All you have to do is to give us a review on Facebook or Apple Podcasts before the end of this month, and you'll go into the draw. It'll only take a minute, and it actually does help new listeners find us. We have a couple of reviews, both via Snowheads. I'm not sure they're formal reviews, but a user called Lane says a couple of very interesting specials. Keep up the good work. And Mike Powell, who regular listeners will recognise as Mike, who's told us about skiing in Wales, says getting better each episode. So that's very kind of you, Mike. We also had a question from Stuart Barber. Now, he asked if the cable car from Alpe d'Huez to Les des Alpes is still happening. Now, this is a project that's been going on for years, and it probably will be discussed. There's so many different communes and different parties involved in this. Conceptually, it is still going to happen. But I think what I'm going to do is try and get someone on the podcast from one of those resorts to talk about it in more detail so we can give it a proper answer. So otherwise, that is it for episode 70. Coming up, I mentioned the Afghan special. Charlie is going to be out in Engelberg trying snowshoeing, so we're going to be covering that in the next episode. You can follow me at Skipedia and the show at the Ski Podcast. And I'd like to thank Nick and Vanessa, my guests today. And thanks to Switzerland Tourism for their support. And finally, thank you, listener, for listening. So until next time, from Nick, Vanessa and myself, goodbye. Hi there, listener. Iain here. I just wanted to let you know that you can now support the Ski Podcast at buymeacoffee.com. This blank season has been a tough winter for all snow lovers. I've spent a lot of time and put in a lot of effort to try and give you an episode every week through this winter to give you your taste of snow, even if we can't go out there ourselves. Now, I do it anyway because I love skiing, but if you do enjoy the Ski Podcast and you'd like to support us, then you can literally buy me a coffee, or in my case a tea, at buymeacoffee.com. Just go to buymeacoffee.com/the Ski Podcast. Thanks very much.